I'll have a brief video about Mike Adams and natural news and the weaponization of the judicial branch against him coming up either today or tomorrow. So keeping eyes on Mike Adams makes sense over at Natural News, because it gives me the idea that the focus could quite possibly be a little bit less on just the outright fear porn they're putting out into the country using this disease, but also it says that the ultimate goal might be a push towards a vaccine and them going after anti-vaxxer websites through the government means at the same time as the coronavirus is hitting the social meme landscape. To me, is in no way, shape, or form a coincidence. And the problem is if we don't keep track of this and if we don't stand up to this, then they will take this model that they've used on Mike Adams and they will replicate it, and they'll do it over and over again, as the bureaucracy has shown itself to do time and time again. So when I start research into a topic, like in this instance, the coronavirus, I like to push my searches a few years backwards to see what was being talked about at the time. And in this case, I found a Zero Hedge article that has quotes from both Business Insider and Reuters about MERS, what would be later known as MERS. And I just wanted to read a few excerpts of this article and point out to you how vague and disconcerting the numbers are on their report. The first case of Saudi Arabia, where 2 more people have died from novel coronavirus, a new strain of virus similar to the one that caused SARS, in an outbreak in Al-Anza region of Saudi Arabia. The Deputy Health Minister for Public Health said on Sunday. Zayed Mimish said that in the latest cluster of infections, 15 cases have been confirmed and 9 of those patients had died. It's quoting the Wall Street Journal here, talking about how they said 8 months later, it seems that neither the epidemic nor the source or host have been identified as to what the real state of affairs in the kingdom is. Like in China, one must rely on local media for truthful reporting, something which, as Fukushima taught everyone, can be a bitter pill to swallow for some or most governments. What is more troubling is that with the lack of accurate news flow from out of Saudi Arabia come unforeseen consequences, such as the eventual spread of the virus from its localized region to a new area such as Europe, or in this case, France to start. Now, this is where it moves into the France part of the article. But keep in mind, at this point, MERS had only transferred from animals to humans. It had not transferred from human to human at this point like SARS had, until this Reuters report comes in about a second diagnosis of new SARS-like coronavirus has been confirmed in France, the health ministry said it on Sunday, in what appeared to be a case of human-to-human transmission. The new infection was found in a 50-year-old man who had shared a hospital room with France's only other known sufferer, the ministry said in a statement. This is what France tacks onto the bottom of their statement. There has been very little evidence of direct and sustained human-to-human transmission of nCoV, which is just novel coronavirus, in contrast to the pattern seen in the related severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, virus, which killed 775 people in 2003. Okay, so here we have MERS, that at the end of this article is clearly transferred in between a human and a human, just like SARS could. But you have something that in MERS, we said that 9 of the 15 cases reportedly died, so it seems much more lethal, right? So now you have these coronaviruses kind of running in tandem in research. You have the MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, and you have the SARS. And they each have parts that could be particularly deadly to the human race, but they don't separately. They don't have those exact variants. Okay. All right. So I wanted to find out what was the actual statistics behind the MERS infection. And the best place I found that, funny enough, was a Canadian website, and we'll find out why that's funny later. So to find out the relation between these coronaviruses that we know of, specifically SARS and MERS, I ended up on the Infection Prevention and Control Canada webpage, because of course it's starting out with the current novel coronavirus, but if you go down, it covers SARS and it covers MERS. Now, some of the information I found here under MERS was pretty insane. For instance, in September 2012, so that means that it had been going on for a while when that article was written in May of 2013, a new coronavirus was isolated from a patient in Saudi Arabia. Since then, there have been limited number of human-to-human cases identified. They keep enunciating that. Limited human-to-human cases identified, clustered in mainly the Arabian Peninsula. This particular strain of coronavirus has not been previously identified to humans. There is very limited information on transmission severity and clinical impact, with only a small number of cases reported thus far. The emergence of this new coronavirus is globally recognized as an important and major challenge for all of the countries which have been affected, as well as the rest of the world. This virus is not the SARS virus. The greatest global concern is about the potential for this new virus to spread. This is partly because the virus has already caused severe disease in multiple countries, although in small numbers. Different clusters seen in multiple countries increasingly support the hypothesis that there is a close contact. This novel virus, coronavirus, can transmit from person to person. Let's read that again. Different clusters seen in multiple countries increasingly support the hypothesis that when there is close contact, this novel coronavirus can transmit from person to person. There we go. This pattern of person-to-person transmission has remained limited to some small clusters, and so far there is no evidence that this virus has the capability of sustained, generalized transmission in communities. Persons with underlying medical conditions may have increased susceptibility to the infection. Now pay attention right here. The incubation period may exceed 10 days in some patients. This is MERS. It goes over how the staff needs to handle MERS. And then this is what really blew my mind. You know, Zero Hedge was bummed about not being able to get reports of the statistics involved. Well, this is probably why. This is 1,374 cases in Saudi Arabia, and of those cases, 575 of them died. Since April 2012, there have been 1,714 cases of human infection with MERS coronavirus. Several countries in the Middle East have reported cases. 645 of the 1,714 cases have died. Case fatality rate of 38%. So we have a SARS virus, a coronavirus, that is highly communicable and spreads from person to person. And we have a MERS coronavirus that is not as communicable from person to person. It has shown signs that it is capable of doing it, but it's not nearly as efficient as traveling from human to human as SARS is. However, it has a 38% case fatality rate, and it has a 10-day latency period, which SARS is of course missing both of those things. Now, I'm sure that the governments who were keeping track of these things realized the same things that I just said just now. And I'm sure that immediately as these coronaviruses were discovered, they were distributed to the various level 4 facilities that are capable of handling such viruses throughout the world. And so I wanted to go check and find where these level 4 facilities were and what was going on with them. So here I am at Liquid Search, and I want to see how many facilities are rated at BSL-4 and can handle these types of viruses. And it says only 15 BLS-4 facilities were identified at the time of the October 4th, 2007 assessment. In comparison, a level 3 facility, there was 1,356 of those facilities. Okay, so 15. And if you look through here, you can see, mostly Five Eyes and such. And of course we see China, Hubei, Wuhan, but that has a different number by 2010. So we're going to look into that. So in reality, level 4 that is at Hubei was actually not created in 2010, because that would mean they would have gotten the coronavirus and the MERS. They would have gotten the MERS virus and the SARS virus like everybody else did who had level 4 facilities in 2013 when the actual infection happened. All right? So these are the level 4 facilities that are throughout the world right now, many of them here in the United States. Okay. English translated, Chinese press release about China inaugurating their first biocontaminant level 4 laboratory in Wuhan. And it says that in January 31st of 2015, they got their first level 4 facility. Now, what does that tell me? Well, that tells me that SARS, that tells me that MERS definitely were not at that facility because it was not a level 4 at the time. So if they are looking into doing level 4 experiments on biologics, they're going to have to acquire those biologics. At least all the ones that were looked at prior to 2015. So it seemed obvious to me that after their biolevel 4 facility was created, that the Chinese government would go on a push to acquire these level 4 biohazards to fill this facility. And I'm sure they already had plans ahead of time on how they were going to do that. And one of those ways was definitely something that President Trump has been focusing on, whether you like him or not, and that is intellectual property theft. And so I wanted to know if there was any Chinese espionage going on in the bioweapon area. And sure enough, I ended up back in Canada. Warfare experts question why Canada was sending lethal viruses to China. I think the Chinese activities are highly suspicious, one expert said after it was revealed a Winnipeg lab sent samples of Ebola and virus to China. It talks about how they had done some preparatory things about some diseases. But March, okay, so it said that the scientists from the Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory, the NML, participated in this drill that they had. And then it goes on to say, but this March, that same lab shipped samples of the virus family and of Ebola to China, which has long been suspected of running a secretive biological warfare program. China strongly denies it, of course. Some experts are raising questions about the March transfer, which appears to be at the center of a shadowy Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigation and dismissal of a top scientist at the Winnipeg-based NML. I would say this Canadian contribution might likely be counterproductive, said Danny Shoham, a biological and chemical warfare expert at Israel's
Bar-Ilan
University. I think the Chinese activities are highly suspicious in terms of exploring at least those viruses and BW agents. They go on to speak with this neurology professor at Georgetown, and a bioweapons expert at the U.S. Special Operations Command says that it's worrisome. Chinese been expanding their investment in bioscience, of course, because in 2015 they got the level 4 facility. Okay, so I wanted to see what was actually going on with these Chinese nationals that were working at a Canadian laboratory and shipped level 4 diseases to their level 4 facility. And the scientist talking about the situation in Canada and the transfer of these bioweapons to the facility in Wuhan. And here it said, quote, all transfers of risk 4 group samples follow strict transportation requirements and are authorized by senior officials at the lab and the NML. Okay, and they say all of these standards were met. It says here, although health officials insist all protocols were met, anonymous sources report that the shipment lacked an agreement spelling out intellectual property rights, known as Material Transfer Agreement, according to the Winnipeg Free Press. The document would protect Canada's claim over the viruses, assuming they had been patented through the Budapest Treaty Deposit, an internationally recognized system for patenting intentions involving microorganisms. Quote, if China was leveraging these scientists in Canada to gain access to a potentially valuable pathogen or to elements of a virus without having to license the patent, it makes sense with the idea of China trying to gain access to valuable IP without paying for it, says Leah West, an expert in national security law at Northam Patterson School of International Affairs, in an interview with CBC News. Goes on to say, frankly, if it's already in China, cat's out of the bag, adds China intellectual property expert Mark Cohen in an interview with Winnipeg Free Press. They're probably culturing it already, as in they're culturing the diseases that were sent to Wuhan. The March shipment took place during a dispute between the U.S. and China, which led to the arrest of an executive of Hawaii. I've never been able to say that correctly. We'll let her do it.
Huawei
Technologies, and the later detainment of 2 Canadians in China, according to the Winnipeg Free Press. Given the tension between the two countries, Chinese, Canadian researchers and academics are starting to worry they may be singled out and targeted. So trying to get some more information on these Chinese nationals that shipped these viruses and what happened to them, I ended up here at the CBC. And they review a lot of the information that we went on to. 2 months after that shipment on May 24th, the Public Health Agency of Canada, the PHAC, referred an administrative matter to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police that resulted in the removal of 2 Chinese research students, Xiang Guoku and Keding Cheng, and several international students on July 5th. That would be all the international students that those 2 had brought over. Here's the strict protocols and everything was followed spiel. So Xiang Guoku is the head of the National Microbiology Lab's Vaccine Development and Antiviral Therapy section in the Special Pathogens Program. She is responsible, or was responsible, for the lab that worked with Ebola. Her husband, Keding Cheng, is also a PHAC biologist that focuses in coronaviruses. That's not on this page, but you can look it up yourself. Also, I'll include all the links to this information in the description. Of course, neither scientist has responded to requests for comment, although some of their former colleagues say Kuo is not just a world-renowned scientist who developed a treatment for Ebola, but also a researcher with ethics and integrity. And here again is this quote that it's not about her integrity. If China was leveraging these scientists in Canada to gain access to potentially valuable pathogen or to elements of a virus without having to license the patent, it makes sense with the idea of China trying to gain access to valuable IP without paying for it. That's exactly the context in which it makes sense. So what do we know so far? Well, we know that SARS and MERS have basically symptoms or aspects of the diseases that, if they were put together, would create a very, very dangerous virus. We have the last case of MERS being around 2013, SARS, of course, before that, and we have both of those diseases spread throughout all the level 4 labs in the world. Now, I think it would be foolish to assume that those level 4 labs didn't immediately start looking into the viruses. And although all these countries claim that they do not pursue bioweapons, I think it's safe to say they all do. One of the things that I feel like is just an obvious thing to do would be to take the coronavirus SARS and combine it with the coronavirus MERS. Why? Well, SARS is easily communicable from person to person, but it's not that fatal. MERS, on the other hand, was not easily communicable to people. However, not only was it fatal, it also had a latency of 14 days almost, where people are walking around with no symptoms, yet spreading the disease. If you were to somehow combine these into a bioweapon, it would be one hell of a coronavirus. So, did this coronavirus or did these coronaviruses end up in Wuhan because of intellectual property theft and espionage? I don't know. Canada can't even really figure it out. They haven't charged them with anything. They just ripped them of their security clearances. But whether it was put together in China or whether it was something that was put together and then they stole, it seems kind of obvious to me that this was not released through a fish market. It is a bioweapon that China either acquired through espionage or put together themselves when they acquired the separate SARS and MERS viruses. I do believe that this is a possibility. It's the one possibility that sticks out in my mind. And so I wanted to make a show about it. What you're seeing right in front of you is a picture that I got of the modular hospitals that they're building in Wuhan. You know, everybody's seen the pictures of the cranes, and they were going to build 2 hospitals in 8 days. Now they're going to build 3, but that's not anything to be worried about. I mean, that's a completely normal reaction, right? Like putting 50 million people in quarantine. That's completely normal. But I asked my friends, like, what do you see about these pictures? And I was so surprised. Like, one of them was like, oh, it looks like housing in Iraq, which it does look like what we were in Iraq. If you're a vet, you kind of look at it and you can see it. But no, the bars on the outside of the window, and they can lock from the outside. There's literally a key in the door there. So these people are coming to the hospital because they're sick, and this is their future. And that should get everyone really thinking to themselves, can I self-quarantine? Do I have enough food and water here in my home? Can I stave off my landlord and pay my monthly rent even though I'm not going into work? What would it be like if in the United States they tried to put 50 million people in quarantine? You have 4 million people in the greater Philadelphia area? More than 10 times that many. I hate to be a fearmonger, and I hate to think that I'm putting out fear porn, but at this point I don't feel like I am. I have seen this thread from the beginning of the SARS virus to the creation of the bioweapon lab in Wuhan to the acquisition of these bioweapons by China over time, and then this specific instance in Canada. And I feel like I have to put that out there. And I feel like I have to show people these modular hospital beds, because they look a lot like prison cells to me. And if you don't think China is freaked out, these are pictures of China building literal earthen berms to block in these entire cities. This is not something that you do for your average everyday virus. And just so everyone knows context, I do understand that they were internationally scolded for their response to SARS. And so, of course, with the trade deal and their general need and want to be accepted by the West, I could see that they might be overreacting to this to show that they've learned from their mistakes of SARS. But 50 million people quarantined. They're literally building earthen berms around this city. And the numbers are going to change. They're going to change, and we're not going to know what to believe. And we live in fucking mirror world, man. So this could all just be a big giant wag the dog. But I look at this chart, and I see 81 deaths from 2,827 confirmed cases. But the thing that stuck out to me that was just shocking is that since the beginning of this, 51 people have been recovered and discharged. Of the 5,794 suspected cases of coronavirus in China, 81 people have died and 51 people have been discharged. There is an attitude in the truther community. I understand where it comes from because we're all so jaded. We don't know what's real. You can't trust anything you see on a screen, essentially. But this attitude, I'm going to show you two different attitudes that I feel like are really dangerous, because we're truthers. We're supposed to research. We're supposed to look at things from an objective point of view. And if we just assume that every disease or viral thing that hits the news is automatically fake, then we're not doing what we say we do. H1N1, wild polio virus, Ebola, Zika, Ebola. I have survived your predecessors and I will survive you. Until you don't. This meme points out an interesting cycle in history, which history is nothing but cycles. That 1720 plague, 1820 plague, 1920 plague, 2020 coronavirus. You son of a bitch, I'm in. It's a funny meme. It's a funny meme. I'm not saying that you guys need to go out and buy masks. Although I will say, if you do, don't buy masks, because surgical masks are meant to prevent the patient from getting anything from you. You want disposable respirators. Those are meant to prevent you from getting sick from the patient. But I'm not suggesting that you need to go out and buy that now. I'm not suggesting that you need to get disinfectant and a hand sanitizer, and you need to start watching where you go and who you interact with, that you need to get into the practice of not touching your face and washing your hands. I'm not suggesting that kind of panic is needed or warranted. But the people who watch me and know me and talk to me know that we don't do what's warranted. We go above and beyond that. And so the question will be up to you. More to come.